You are still going to ask your masters, do I grant the leave to appeal or not? So you are dealing with an invisible hand that is controlling the proceedings in that particular court.
Hello, folks. Welcome back from northern Pennsylvania. This is Chris in Erie, Pennsylvania, up here visiting South African refugees. In March of this year, 2026, the South African government, through its Director of International Relations and Cooperation, issued a formal démarche to the newly appointed U.S. Ambassador Brent Bozell, following his public criticism of South Africa's court ruling regarding the Kill the Boer song. Bozell, who was appointed late 2025, nominated and confirmed, and then came over to South Africa in early 2026, was reprimanded for questioning the judiciary, which was seen as an affront to South African sovereignty. So, did he really insult the judiciary, or did he just simply make a statement that's obvious to the world? Yet here is Julius Malema, leader of a major political party, a member of parliament, a member of the Judicial Services Committee, openly insulting the dignity of the court and that of a magistrate, an officer of the court. After being cautioned about his comments and his conduct, he immediately went outside and insulted the dignity of South Africa's courts. A sitting member of parliament, the leader of a political party, a member of the Judicial Services Commission. And he says these things, which clearly insult the dignity and are an affront to South Africa's sovereignty by one of its own citizens.
He lies in court yesterday. To lie to court is a criminal offense. He says, we gave the gun to accused number 2 after he was acquitted.
Now, South Africa's useless parliament, which represents narrow parochial interests, not those of South Africa's citizens, sits silent, making no mention of the egregious conduct of a convicted criminal who sits in their midst. No effort to even mention this blatant disrespect for the courts. Ambassador Bozell expressed a personal view. He did not insult the judiciary. That was a stretch, to say the least. Yet Juju does exactly that after being sentenced for being a criminal. And he wasn't happy about his sentence as a criminal, a convicted criminal. Let that sink in. A convicted criminal who sits on the Judicial Services Commission, a convicted criminal. There's no question about his conviction as a criminal. He's a criminal. He cannot appeal that criminal conviction. He can't appeal a sentence. But the South African Parliament can punish its members for misconduct or contempt through sanctions authorized by the Powers, Privileges, and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. So they can sanction him. They can do that for misconduct. His misconduct is clear. How do you let a convicted criminal who endangered public safety, who tried to hoodwink the court, who misled the court and took South Africans for rubes, how do you let him sit in your midst? Now, penalties for members of parliament include formal reprimands, fines of up to 1 month's salary, suspension of parliamentary privileges, suspension without pay, and ordering an apology. Why have they not ordered Julius Malema to render an apology to the Magistrate Olivier and to the South African court system? There is no question the criminal Malema has zero respect for South Africa's courts, where he appears to have committed perjury about a toy gun, lying to the court, and then attacks the court moments after his sentencing.
So we must make sure that she gets reported to the Magistracy Commission. Meanwhile,
the Iranian embassy in Pretoria constantly uses offensive language and imagery to attack the United States. The Director of International Relations and Cooperation has yet to call the terror state's ambassador in for a démarche for his conduct, his undiplomatic conduct, which is what they said Bozell did. Hypocrisy is the very essence of the contemporary African National Congress, a shameful incarnation of a liberation movement. These clowns invoke the very liberation movement they have betrayed through their pilfering, profiteering, racist legislation, and race hustling. Julius Malema is a convicted criminal, yet he still sits in Parliament and he still sits in the Judicial Services Commission. No shame in this parliament whatsoever. Not a single opposition party, to my knowledge, has raised an objection to his sitting on the Judicial Services Committee. To my knowledge, not a single opposition party or the ruling party has bothered to try to sanction him for his misconduct.
The only thing we need to do is to make sure that this prosecutor, who is arrogant and suffers from a short man syndrome, is taught a lesson And we can only teach him a lesson by sitting on his neck and making sure that he is prosecuted and is arrested for lying to court and is disciplined at work for exercising the powers he doesn't have.
They treat this as if it's a petty joke. Yet this is a man who inspires people to commit violence, who incites people to commit violence with domestic terrorism at 43 clicks locations, who attacks people in Senegal and has his followers rip down sides, damage rubbish bins, and threaten, intimidate the public. This is a man who sits in the Senegal court having no standing listening to the court case. This is a man who is dangerous by his very actions and words. A man who fired live ammunition, 15 rounds from a 9mm and 7 from a rifle into the air, and then tried to pervert the means of justice according to the court itself by trying to change out the receiver in the rifle. This is a man who has apparently perjured himself in court. This is a man who has undue affluence, yet not a single lifestyle investigation into how he rides around wearing $10,000 suits and Breitling watches and rides around in Land Cruisers and BMWs. A man who's never accomplished a single thing in his life except grift off the ANC Youth League and then grift into the formation of the Economic Freedom Fighters. This man sits in Parliament, yet Ambassador Bozell is demarched for saying that he doesn't care what the courts in South Africa say. It's still hate speech. That's what he said. But the courts themselves declared in 2011 that it was hate speech. They just chose not to take the issue up again this time. So what is the deal here, ANC? Why the hypocrisy? Well, we know why the hypocrisy. Because the ANC doesn't really believe that Bozell insulted South Africa. They were just looking for an excuse to try to embarrass the United States. And this is a path to purgatory. They are not on the path of the angels. The African National Congress' continued efforts to insult, belittle, and attack the United States are going to fall flat. Interesting thing has been happening this past week. Notice all the famous accounts, even Ian Miles Chung has put comments about South Africa's racist legislation and the slaughter of white South Africans on farms on Twitter, on YouTube. Lots of major social media content creators, whether they know what's going on in South Africa or not, isn't germane. But the tens of millions of views, the millions and millions of people around the world who are now seeing the truth come out of South Africa about its racist 145 laws, impoverishing people, its effort to destroy every cultural symbol of minority groups, its effort to exterminate through a genocidal cultural campaign against Afrikaans, its theft of land through expropriation without compensation and the intimidation of property owners, and the mass slaughter of people taking place in South Africa, black, white, and brown, are now coming to the world's attention, denied by the ANC repeatedly. And they've gotten away with it through a corrupt and fawning press in South Africa and in the West. That day has ended. Social media content creators, independent journalists are now repeating the stories and the narratives about all the horrors happening in South Africa, none of which are necessary, all of which could be avoided. A country of great potential and promise of its black, its white, its brown people, its Christians, its Muslims, its Jews, being perverted by a party that is failing left and right. And rather than accept responsibility for their failure and their inability to inherit the mantle of leadership during the liberation struggle and transition to a post-liberation government, their inability to govern, to deliver services, to treat everyone in South Africa equally before the law, has led to the demise of South Africa, a country on the verge of becoming a banana republic. What a tragedy indeed. What a sad, sad day for South Africa. When will Julius Malema be sanctioned by the very parliament he sits in and draws his salary from? When will he suffer loss of salary? When will he be given an order to apologize to the magistrate and to the court? It's okay for members who select judges to insult the courts, but not a foreign ambassador to make an obvious statement the whole world is aware of. Something very rotten in the state of South Africa. What say you, South Africa, Mzansi? Cheers.